digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jams session. Today we are joined by Luke Robert Mason of Virtual Futures. Welcome, Luke.
Thank you for having me.
So today it's just you and I, so it's quite an intimate conversation by comparison to how we would normally roll. But what I want to do today is I want to talk about augmenting humanity, because I know that you have had quite a lot of experience in this area in terms of talking to various companies and individuals who are experimenting or working in this space. And so what I want to do initially, what I would like to start with, is just understanding from your perspective what it means to augment the human body from your perspective, because I think different people have a different perspective on it. So I'd love to hear from you what you think the core crux of augmentation of the human body is.
So it's so funny. My first engagement with the world of augmented reality and virtual reality was purely an accident I made back in 2012. So I was couch surfing essentially through San Francisco, and I ended up in San Diego, and I saw this event that was being advertised called the Augmented World Expo, as I think it was called at the time. It may have had a different name at the time. And it was run by a gentleman called Ori Imbar. And my research interest from my undergraduate was in cyborgs, a particular cyborg performance artist called Stellark. So I explored this concept and notion of augmentation, and didn't really know what AR was, augmented reality was. So I emailed him and went, is there any chance I can come down and talk about cyborgs at your augmented reality event? And the guy goes, all right, fair enough. This is not quite what we're looking for in terms of subject matter, but you're more than welcome to come down and present. And it's interesting how that word augmentation has been taken by the AR folks and their obsession with this whole notion of augmenting reality. Because for me, augmentation has always been about the human, always been about the body. My particular interest in augmented humans is really focused on folks who are using technology to manipulate their own bodies. So my background was originally performance art, sort of 5 to 6 years ago now. And I came across this gentleman called Stellark. Now, Stellark is a performance artist. He calls himself a cyborg. He's a cyborg performance artist. And Stellark has an ear surgically implanted into his arm. Now, the first thing that most people want to ask Stellark is the question, why?
Yes.
Well, for me, when I was looking at this performance artist's work, it was the question of, well, why not? And Stellark has this wonderful phrase which goes, we live in an age of circulating flesh. In other words, your blood can be thrown from my body tomorrow if we're the same blood type, or my organs could be in your body tomorrow if you're a donor, and vice versa. And his argument was, well, look, we have all this biomedical science. We can manipulate the body in whatever way we see fit. So why not have an ear on your arm? You know, having an ear on not having an ear on your arm is almost a failure of imagination.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I remember reading somewhere that he was going to get an implant inside the ear so that people could hear what
he did.
Yeah, what he was hearing with that ear on his arm.
So this was an incredible project. So basically, he took a mesh of his own ear and then grew a version of his ear in essentially a petri dish using tissue cultures. And then over the course, I think it was about 3 months, he had a surgeon cut open his arm and put a small bag inside of just under the skin. And for 3 months, he self-injected himself with saline solution to stretch the skin, and then had the ear, which was grown of his own cells, added inside of his arm and then vacuum packed down. So it then grew its own blood supply. It became part of his body. And at one point, he wanted a Bluetooth microphone.
That was it,
placed into the ear. And unfortunately, technology doesn't always do well embedded or implanted into the body, and he eventually had to have it taken out for certain complications. The whole idea was every time he'd walk into a Wi-Fi hotspot, people could listen into his phone call conversations. So there, arguably, it had some functional basis. But his real argument is, look, in a world where we can manipulate our body in whatever way we see fit, why do we just choose to have, slightly thinner cheekbones or slightly larger tits or a slightly larger arse thanks to Nicki Minaj? Why is it we choose those sorts of aesthetic augmentations or manipulations? Why not have the imagination to have an ear in your arm? There's this phrase by a philosopher of the extra beam movement, a gentleman called Max Moore, who had this phrase that he coined in 1989 called morphological freedom. And morphological freedom is the ability to manipulate your body, the morphology of your body in whatever way you see fit. For Max, it was really about, because he was a transhumanist, someone who wanted to improve the body through new technologies. For Max, it was really about how to become faster, better, stronger. But for individuals like Stellark and the individuals I'm personally interested in, it was about how do we use these technologies not to be better, but to be different.
Yeah.
So you have these everyday cyborgs now, and my master's thesis was really about the difference between individuals like Stellark and his performance practice and individuals like Neil Harbisson, who you may know about. The colorblind artist, Neil, has achromatopsia. So he's an individual who cannot see color. But 10 years ago, he had an antenna added to his
I have heard about this person.
skull. So his way of augmenting his world is through this piece of technology that he wears durationally. Now, the press go, oh, Neil Harbisson can now hear color. And yes, to a degree, this device does allow him to essentially, it's a camera on his head that takes light waves through a digital process, converts those light waves into sound waves, and then converts them back into an analog wave that can be used to vibrate his skull. So what he's creating is not really a device that allows him to hear color. It's an entirely new sensory modality. And the sense organ is the device.
It's the antenna.
But it's not a device, it's an organ. In Neil's own admission, he says, like, you know, this is no longer a tool or a technology, it's part of my body.
Yeah.
If people come up to me and want to touch my antenna, I recoil as if I came up to you, Tanya, and tried to touch your nose. You know, it's become so much part of him and his way of being that he now has these sonochromatic dreams. So he dreams in sonic color.
Yeah.
But what was fascinating me is why does that begin to occur? Why does that process allow him to suddenly be able to have those sort of dreams? Why has the device become part of his body?
Yeah.
And really it was about duration. You know, the issues with a lot of the devices that I was seeing back in 2012 and we've seen over the last 5 years is the fact that they're instant gratification. The AR goggles, you want to put them on and you want to be able to augment your world. Well, Neil has been wearing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So his brain has got used to having this device.
It's almost like he's reprogrammed the way his brain
Well, it has.
functions.
You know, the argument is that thanks to neuroplasticity, that his brain now accepts that he has an organ, which is a antenna. It's become part of his body.
But here's the thing that I find quite interesting, and I kind of want to find out your views and thoughts on this, which is this idea that certain individuals certainly are very open to this idea of modifying their body or improving their body in particular ways. But generalistically, in terms of the mass population, the idea of inserting technology into the body is still that thing that's slightly unacceptable. It's kind of like going back to the late 80s and early 90s where, every movie, the bad guy was always technology. It's like Terminator and all these things where it's like technology will destroy us. If we allow it to be too close to us as human beings, it will destroy us. And over time, that attitude has changed a little bit in terms of people will now wear technology and they will allow technology to rest on their wrist or, be on the surface of their body. But there is still this inherent fear about the insertion of technology. So people are fine with a contact lens on the surface of the eye. But if you were to say, let's insert something into the actual, eye, people would be a bit, don't know about that. And one of the most recent things that I've seen is that there's a company that is microchipping all of their employees to allow them to be able to utilize the building around them. And, whether it's opening doors or getting, vending machines to work for them or whatever the thing is, by microchipping all the employees, they're able to give them access to productivity and function within the building. And there's a really emotional response from people who are like, oh my God, no, why would you do this to your workforce? It's invading their bodies and people get quite defensive about that idea. And so I wonder how much shift there needs to be in terms of that cultural attitude towards the insertion of technology, in your opinion. How much of a shift needs to occur still?
It always shocked me when I saw the gentleman with AR goggles stand on stage and say how we have like a UX or user experience or issue with people wearing goggles. And I was sitting there going and thinking exactly that. It's like, well, yeah, at least you can take the goggles off with something that is implanted or inserted into the body. It's the realm of insidables, implantables, embeddables, edibles.
It's like smart pills, for example.
100%. And those have a particular function. You know, you will swallow a microchip if it's able to send which interestingly was another project by Stellar back in the 90s where he swallowed a camera. But you will do that if it serves a very, very functional basis. And I think something about swallowing technology isn't so bad. It's the problem is, can you actually keep it inside your body? Would be the issue. There's something about the visceral experience of cutting the skin. You know, we have this layer around our body, this massive organ called skin, and people have that very visceral response to being cut or having something cut open. And it's interesting to see how, yes, the general populace has that issue, but the real pioneers are the folks like the grinder movement. Now, grinders, you may know the projects by companies like Grindhouse Wetware, been inserting rather large pieces of technology under their body for a while. And these guys, people try and the press try to make out what they're doing as being, you know, weird or odd or disgusting, but really they're pushing the boundaries of what the body will take. There's a fantastic individual who runs a company called Dangerous Things. His name's Amal. And what he's able to really understand from his both self-experimentation, you know, sometimes it can be trial and error, and some of the grinders do, you know, jokingly advocate that all you need to become a cyborg is a scalpel and a bottle of vodka, and that's pretty much, you know, all the medical training you need. But what he's found and what he's realized, especially in the chip area, is what materials are biosafe, for example. You know, how to charge these devices once they're under the skin. You know, what chemicals will degrade, what will happen if a microchip starts traveling away from where you've implanted it and starts moving around the body, which can be a risk. He really understands, and he's one of those rare individuals who really understands, you know, the body first and the technology second, but it only comes through experimentation because otherwise, self-experimentation, otherwise there is really no research there. We're still a long way from it being mass consumer adopted. But the example of the offices is a great case study of whereby it's become accepted to a degree. And the argument now is, you know, look, we all have our dogs and cats microchip, then why not microchip each other from birth? If, you know, that's a way to identify our being.
I'm having visions of Demolition Man right now.
Well, and there's massive, larger ethical issues there with regards to if you have a self-identifying chip. The crazy thing is the body in its own right is something that identifies with the world. I think we've got more chance of the body speaking to technology than technology being planted into the body and having to speak to the world. In other words, I think, you know, fingerprint scanners, iris scanners, your DNA, your saliva, your sweat, you know, those unique identifiers will be the ways in which we can interact uniquely with technology.
So what's your take then on technology that's on the surface of the body rather than being inserted into the body? So things like electronic tattoos, for example, or, you know, wearables, or, you know, all these other types of technology that very much sit on the surface of the body but aren't necessarily being inserted into the body. What's your take on the direction that some of those things are taking? So for example, electronic tattoos, they've been around for quite a while now, at least 5 years, but we've not really seen any significant progression in terms of mass adoption or productivity and usefulness of electronic tattoos. Sure, they look cool, and, you know, we see the occasional video about them every now and then, but it feels like there hasn't really been any significant movement forward with those types of technology.
There hasn't, and I doubt they're aesthetically interesting.
Yeah,
you know, tattoos are an aesthetic thing. It is a form of body modification. You know, it's when you do it not for a functional basis. E-tattoos are trying to prove that they have a functional basis in the world, i.e. you can control your phone through your electronic tattoo. And quite frankly, you know, that's not the reason you would want a tattoo in any way, shape or form. Now, I'd have an electronic tattoo if I could do something fundamentally interesting with it. Or if it were, a lot of these electronic tattoos are temporary as well. I mean, you know, could you start tattooing with tattoo guns, electronic ink that creates circuits in the body that you go to a rave or a club and you light up essentially, something like a Tron. The issue is power and how do you power these sorts of things. And
I'd just like to see a productive use of something like that, because it just feels like there isn't an application for it that feels very productive. You know, it just feels very superficial, the way that people have proposed to use it. And it's kind of a bit like the Project Jacquard with, you know, yarn manufacturing and being able to, you know, insert metals into the yarn and therefore create, you know, materials and cloths and jackets and things that actually can conduct energy and can be used as circuits. All really interesting. But what's the actual practical application of that? You know, are you really going to walk around with a jacket that you can kind of, you know, tap it and turn up your music? You know, is that really the thing that you want to do with it?
Isn't that the case with all fashion to a degree? I mean, it's there for an aesthetic quality rather than for a functional quality. And it's funny when the fashion tech collaboration space is absolutely fascinating. There's some incredible people doing some incredible work in that space. But there feels to me at least, that aesthetics come first there.
Yeah.
And in the e-tattoo movement, it's kind of the technologists develop the thing, and they're like, all right, let's find a function for it.
Let's figure it out.
Why is it just not good enough? Why isn't it good enough for them for it to just be cool? Or aesthetically interesting.
Okay, clearly I'm thinking about it too much like a technologist. Like, show me the purpose. Okay, so in terms of all the different types of technology that are flying around at the moment and things that people are experimenting with, what's the thing that either A, excites you the most, or B, that you kind of think there has to be a significant change, whether that's a cultural change or a technological shift, in order for that thing to actually catch on and become a mainstream thing? What's the thing that you would say is really kind of stuck out in your mind so far?
That's a really unfair question. That requires stiff alcohol and a long think. You know, I'm in a blessed position insofar as I get to experience and see a lot of things first time and first hand. And a lot of the tools and the gimmicks still feel like that. They still feel like tools and gimmicks. It's been a long time since I've seen something that's been, you know, fully transformative. I was blessed to be able to do a documentary with futurism.com, and the stuff that interested me the most was less the functional headgear and the headsets and technology that was kind of very, you know, of the human and of the body. The stuff that really fascinated me was the stuff that's going to fundamentally change massive swathes of the way in which we operate and navigate in the world. And the thing that genuinely I thought was going to be the thing that interested me the least, but it was actually the thing that interested me the most was, you know, this is a VR podcast, but unfortunately I'm going to talk about food. I was able to go and see this company called AeroFarms. Now, AeroFarms are they're a hydroponic vertical farming unit in Newark, New Jersey. So we all got in the car to go and shoot this mini doc, and we literally drive up into the middle of nowhere in New Jersey, and the outskirts of something that looks like an old indoor paintballing arena. And we walk inside, and you're suddenly hit with this vision of these stacks and stacks and stacks of leafy greens being grown under this kind of controlled lighting condition. And one, it was just the oddest thing to see in the middle of a city like New York, New Jersey. And secondly, the story that the founders told was truly mind-boggling, because it didn't feel like the future anymore. It felt like this was happening right now. So what they were doing is that they were growing leafy greens under these very controlled environments. There was no pesticides. They were 130 times more efficient than traditional field farming. And because there's no pesticides, because they don't have to overwash the greens, it tastes incredible too.
And it's also within 24-hour radius of where they supply to, if I recall rightly.
Well, this is the big thing. This was the crazy thing. So, I mean, the technology itself was very, very interesting, but the biggest story they were telling was the thing that fascinated me the most. So the gentleman who showed me around went, look, you know, the vision for this is we'll no longer ever have to grow arugula, for example, in traditional film farming methods. You know, arugula, when it's grown, has to be washed 4 times to remove, you know, feces, animal feces. This stuff doesn't have to be washed. It can be cut off, stuck straight into the packaging. And the vision really is to have, you know, one of these AeroFarms next to every single, you know, Walmart distribution center, or, you know, in 5 years it won't be Walmart, it'll be Amazon Fresh distribution center. And what you suddenly realize is they're not just transforming the way in which we receive food, they're transforming the way in which food is delivered. So you don't have to ship it from a traditional farm. You don't have to put it on the backs of trucks.
It's almost decentralizing things in a way.
In some degree. I mean, people think about vertical farms and they think, oh, we're going to put these on the tops of buildings around London and we're going to have like indoor, farming. This is like at a still industrial scale. And the fact that they're able to literally just cut the stuff off and put it straight into and distribute it straight to where it needs to go in Walmart means you don't have to plaster it with all these chemicals that allow it to last longer. And as I was listening to this guy speak, I suddenly realized that there won't be traditional film farming. Like, it's gone, it's over. Like, full stop. These guys made it work because it costs the same amount, it tastes better, it's 130 times more efficient. Game over. Like, anybody who's like farming leafy green, any of your listeners, and I don't know how many like farmers in middle America you have who grow leafy greens through traditional farming methods, game over. And this isn't like 15-year vision.
This is now.
These guys are going to be doing it in like 2 to 5 years. And it just suddenly dawned on me that the stuff that really matters, the true innovation, is not the stuff you see at like advertising marketing conferences where like the innovation guys are going, look, I got my Snapchat spectacles. It's like innovation. It's like, no, this is going to touch every single one of us because we all have, we've all eaten leafy greens, whether it's our sandwich or we have salads. It's fully transformative. And then, I was also blessed to meet the Memphis Meats guys out in the US, the guys who are growing food in a lab.
I'm still not sure how I feel about that one.
Well, there's nothing viscerally odd about it. Yeah, it's
just the knowledge in your brain that that it's been
grown in a lab, but it's so much cleaner than
I'm sure it is.
So much cleaner than killing an animal. It's murder. They call it murderless meat, and I love that phrase.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah, but it's not even meat. Yeah, the Memphis Meat guys go, look, this isn't meat. It's protein. Essentially, what we're doing is creating hyper efficient protein. Now, there will be those kind of, in the same way that when self-driving cars come around, there will be the folks who will insist on having their traditional Jaguar and driving their cars.
When autonomous vehicles come in, I am all for it. I am ready to sign up. I'm just give me a vehicle that will take me wherever I need to go. I have no problem with that.
And everybody will have that. But you also have those folks who are the very traditionalists.
Yeah.
And it'll be a pleasure to go out for a drive. It'll be an experience. And in the same way, I mean, you see it with steakhouses now. You get a menu at a steakhouse and you get like a 5-page story of like the cow and its name and where it comes from. And that industry will boom because that'll be, traditional ways of eating.
Yeah. That'll be the high-end experience. That'll be
the other food will be produced through this lab-grown meat. Now, right now, they're not the same level as the vertical farming folk because it costs
less complexity, I suppose, with greens.
less complexity, but also it costs a heck of a lot to produce. They've created very small meatballs. They've done a chicken recently, small, and it's a very, very small fillet.
Yeah.
And then you've got artists like Oron Katz, the bioartist, who's seeing this technology and then thinking about what sort of remixes could we have, what new sorts of food and eating experiences.
Fusing different things together.
100%. He just did the frog burger.
Yeah.
A tiny little burger with frog cells in.
Yes, okay.
The question is, will there ever be contamination? We end up with human burgers and we just don't realize it. But there's those sorts of technologies, those things that hit all of us at scale because we all eat, those are the fully transformative things because they don't just rewrite the business model, they throw the business model out the window and go, game over. This is the new way of doing things. And I don't think in 5 years of, usually being on the media side of things, looking at like new sorts of media or the VR or the AR, the whatever the technology is, I don't think I've seen anything that's fundamentally thrown everything out of the bathtub and just gone, boom, all right, we're the new boys in town. Game over. It's crazy. That stuff's exciting.
Okay. So we normally ask for our guests to share with us their social media handle of choice so that our listeners can find out a little bit more about what you're up to and follow you. So what would that be for you?
So you can follow me on Twitter and basically any social media platform on @LukeRobertMason, and our organization Virtual Future is the same. We're everywhere on that handle.
For context, and to give our listeners a little bit of an insight, why don't you very briefly explain exactly what Virtual Futures is?
That's so funny because we know each other 10 years. It's like It's like, why does Tanya want to hear what virtual futures is? Why do you need to hear that again? Very, very quickly, Virtual Futures was originally a cyberculture conference at the University of Warwick in the mid-90s. It actually came at the philosophy department at the University of Warwick, and it occurred at a tipping point whereby folks were going, have you heard about this thing, the internet? Now, this is like 94, 95, and the only internet access point at the University of Warwick was in the basement, and you had to sign up for internet time, and the computer scientists were the kids playing with it. And of course, the general public were like, this internet thing, it's owned by military and researchers, like, what does it mean for us? And these philosophers were saying, like, look, the internet's going to fundamentally change what it means to be human. You just don't see it yet. And really, we've taken that history from 95 and we've kind of brought it into discussions around the future, because what they did was they were historically correct. They were the cyber seers, as the Times called them. And I revived it in 2011 whilst I was at the University of Warwick. And then since then we run events in London to reinsert philosophy back into discussions of technology, because I feel that we do very badly, especially in London, less so in the US, weirdly enough, but especially in London, when we talk about technology, we get fixated on the business models and the growth metrics and the exciting new ways it's going to change industry. What we're really interested in is fundamentally, how does it change the human in the 21st century? It's the only game that matters, only thing that matters.
Okay. And again, if people want to find out more about Virtual Futures, they should visit your website at
virtualfutures.co.uk.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Luke. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. And follow us on Twitter at DigitalJamLTD. DigitalJamSessions.com